there's a lot of characters in the story of Esther, which is what we've been going through. And so I've put these up here with name tags on them. Obviously, you guys over here can't see that, but the key players in this was obviously Esther right here, and King Ahasuerus. He is the king of all Persia. This is world history. He's the king of all Persia. He's the conqueror. He can do basically whatever he wants. He's got harems, and he got rid of Vashti, his first queen, because she didn't come when she was called. So he got with his lawyers and they divorced her. And so he's looking for a new queen. And Esther was a Jewish girl that was beautiful on the inside and the outside. One of the most beautiful people in the world, it says in the scripture, basically, is like, that's the way he viewed her. And so she had favor and became the queen to the king. The king in his harem slept with Esther and made her the queen. I'm talking young Jewish girl, didn't have a choice. And so now God has put her in this position next to the king, and she still had to receive the king's favor to be presented in front of him. It's not like, she could just like go in and say whatever she wanted to the king. She still had to have favor by the king, but because she was so beautiful, it was easy for her to get favor. Haman was the right-hand man of the king, and he was anti-Semitic. He hated the Jews. He hated the Jews, and he wanted to kill the Jews. Mordecai over here was the uncle to Esther. He's a Jew. She didn't have her parents anymore, so Mordecai basically raised Esther. Since Haman was anti-Semitic, he hated Mordecai. But Esther is now in this position. So when we left at the end of chapter 5 last week, here's where it was. Esther got favor from the king. She basically said, I want to have a banquet tomorrow with you and with Haman. And Haman's like, oh, she wants me, the queen wants me to come to a banquet with her and her husband. I'm honored. But as he left the city gate, Mordecai is at the city gate, and he just gets so angry seeing this Jewish man at the city gate and having a position that he has, that he goes home and he tells his wife Zeresh, and she stays up all night and says, basically you should just like kill Mordecai. So he has this 75-foot gallow built, which is like a long pole. When they killed people, they basically impaled them, and then they would go hang them from this gallows so that everybody could see they're dead. And so Haman goes and builds this 75-foot gallow so he can kill Mordecai and hang him on there because he's a Jew. This person right here, Hathach, he was the one early on that helped beautify Esther. He's not in the next few chapters, but that's his role. So we have one other bobblehead we'll introduce here today. So we're getting into chapter 6. Mordecai is like fuming, but at the same time, he's excited because he got invited to a banquet with the king and the queen, and he's going to be celebrated. So here's what happens. That night, sleep escaped the king, so he ordered the book recording daily events to be brought and read to the king. King Ahasuerus can't sleep, so what does he do? He says, let's bring the congregational record in here and read it to me. It's like, you ever have a problem going to sleep at night? Like last night I was like trying to go to sleep, and I was reading this book, and it says, Keith, I think it was the book that you gave me, Stop Worrying and Start Living. And I think in that book, Dale Carnegie says, relax your eyes. So I'm sitting there going, relax my eyes. Relax my eyes. Now relax your mouth. I'm relaxing my mouth. I'm like doing everything I can to go to sleep. And then I start going through the Old Testament, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. I'm just trying to go to sleep. This is literally what the king's doing. He can't sleep, and he's like, go get the congressional readings, what happened today, and read them to me, and that will surely put me to sleep. It says they found the written report of how Mordecai, this was the day of, Mordecai had informed on Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who guarded the entrance when they planned to assassinate King Ahasuerus. So these two of the king's eunuchs, his supportive people, were plotting to kill the king. Mordecai overheard it. He went and told the king, and then the king killed those two. So now Mordecai's got favor with King Ahasuerus. The king inquired, what honor and special recognition have been given to Mordecai for this act? He can't sleep. He's thinking about it. Oh, I should celebrate Mordecai because he basically saved my life. The king's personal attendants replied, nothing has been done for him. The king asked, who is in the court? The king asked, who's in the court? And they said, now Haman was just entering the outer court of the palace to ask the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows he had prepared for him. So now it's the morning. It's the morning. And it just so happens that Haman walks into the outer court at the same time the king goes, who's in the outer court? You think God put Esther in a place? You think God put Mordecai in a place? You think God put Haman in the court at the right time? That God doesn't intervene? It says, now Haman was just entering the outer court of the palace to ask the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows he had prepared for him. The king's attendants answered him, Haman is there standing in the court. The king ordered, have him enter. Haman entered, and the king asked him, what should be done for the man the king wants to honor? You get this? Haman, he's got invited to the banquet by the queen, and then the king actually calls for Haman to come in, and he says, how do we honor someone special? What's Haman thinking? It's all about me. The king wants to honor me. We're having this banquet, da-da-da-da-da. It says, Haman thought to himself, who is it that the king would want to honor more than me? He's a little arrogant. Haman told the king, for the man the king that wants to honor, have them bring a royal garment that the king himself has worn and a horse the king himself has ridden, which has a royal crown on its head. That actual horse has a crown on its head. It's probably more like a turban, which signified a royalty of the horse. Put the garment and the horse under the charge of the king's most noble officials. Have them clothe the man the king wants to honor, parade him on the horse through the city square, and call out before him, this is what is done for the man the king wants to honor. He's like, these are all the things that I would want to happen to me. It says the king told Haman, hurry and do just as you proposed. Haman's like going, yeah. Take a garment and a horse for Mordecai the Jew. What? What? Mordecai the Jew? Who is sitting at the king's gate. Do not leave out anything you have suggested. The king just decreed it. He just said, this is what you're to do. Haman doesn't have a choice. The guy that he just built the gallows for, to impale and to hang up so everybody can see, now he has to honor him just like he wanted to be honored himself. Isn't it a great story? He, at this time at Ahasuerus the king, he's like, he may have known that Haman was a little anti-Semitic because they've been in the court together for some time. But it seems incredible that Ahasuerus would issue this decree without Haman finding out who it was for. You would think. It says, so Haman took the garment and the horse, and he clothed Mordecai and parade. Can you imagine going and taking that garment and putting it on Mordecai? Had him march through the square, calling out before him, this is what is done for the man the king wants to honor. He has to say it himself. Then Mordecai returned to the king's gate. But Haman hurried off home, mournful and with his head covered. Haman told his wife Zeresh, who's over there, and all his friends everything that had happened. His advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, "Since Mordecai is Jewish, and you have begun to fall before him, you won't overcome him, because your downfall is certain." They're literally staying up all night, fretting about what is going to happen. Now, Haman's gone back to his estate, and the wedding was lovely, by the way. The place we went to Liston, Indiana. Never been there before. Small podunk town, but you drive into this estate with trees just lined down the driveway, and then you get to this lodge that was like magnificent, and it was well done, nicely done on the wedding. But I'm assuming that Haman lived in an estate like this. Like he was one of the king's top men. He had a lot of property, a lot of people around him, and they stayed up all night saying, "Yeah, it's not good for you. This isn't going to be good, because now Mordecai's like on the pedestal next to the king, and he's a Jew, and you hate the Jews, so yeah, it's not good for you." Chapter 7, it says, the king and Haman came to feast with Esther the queen. It was a practice back then, especially in Persia, that the highly honored and the nobles would attend the king's breakfast. And then later that day, they would do the same thing for their friends. So we're assuming that this was a breakfast banquet that Esther had requested the two of them to show up. Once again, on the second day, while drinking wine, morning drinkers, the king asked Esther, "Queen Esther, whatever you ask will be given to you. Whatever you seek, even to half the kingdom, will be done." So in other words, we're in this thing together. I get 50%, you get 50%, ask whatever you want. That's favor. Queen Esther answered, "If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if the king is pleased, spare my life." What? Why would I kill my wife? Why would you even say that? It says, "Spare my life, this is my request, and spare my people. This is my desire, for my people and I have been sold to destruction, death, and annihilation. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept silent. Indeed, the trouble wouldn't be worth burdening the king." Her whole speech right here is designed to present her as the one who, like Mordecai, has uncovered this plot. Mordecai told the king about this plot. Now she's getting ready to reveal this plot that is about to happen to the Jews, because if you remember, if you go back, Haman had decided to kill all the Jews. Let's just annihilate all the Jews. And when he did, he took what they called the pure, and he rolled them. They were like dice, and it told him what day they should kill all the Jews. And they sent out this decree to all over Persia. Horses, everybody went out, deliverers went out, and they said, on this day, and it was down the road because the dice were rolled. Who's in charge of the dice? It says in Proverbs that God's in charge of the pure. So it was 8 months from them that the Jews had to prepare for the enemies coming to kill them. You with me? And now she's come to the king and saying, "Well, I'm going to die, and my people are going to die." And the king's like totally confused. He has no idea what she's talking about. She pleads for the king to save her own life and the lives of her people, because it's in his best interest to do so. Verse 8, it says, King Ahasuerus spoke up and asked Queen Esther, "Who is this? And where is the one who would devise such a scheme?" Remember, she invited him to the banquet. Esther answered, "The adversary and enemy is this evil Haman. He's the one. He's taken your signet ring that you gave to him, and he made a decree that all the Jews would be annihilated. Haman stood terrified before the king and queen. The king arose in anger and went from where they were drinking wine to the palace garden, like the king left. Leaves Esther there with Haman. Haman remained to beg Queen Esther for his life because he realized the king was planning something terrible for him. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. There's a couch there. Esther's laying on the couch, and Haman's coming to beg, and he literally is on the couch with Esther. And Esther's husband walks in. The king exclaimed, "Would he actually violate the queen while I'm in the house?" Like he's thinking something is going on, that Haman, his right-hand man, is now moving in on his wife. He says, as soon as the statement left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Typically, when someone did wrong, a criminal was unworthy of even looking at the king. So as soon as he comes in and says, you would do this in my own house to my wife? His guards and soldiers covered Haman's face because, like, dude, you've messed up. You can't even, like, look at the king. Had Haman even, like, knelt a foot away from the queen's couch, the king's reaction still would have been justified. It says, Harbona. Look, we got a new bobblehead. This is Corey Seager holding the World Series championship. Just had to get that in there. Harbona, one of the king's eunuchs, said, hey, there's a gallows that's like 75 feet tall at Haman's house that he had built, that he made for Mordecai, who gave the report that saved the king. The king said, hang Haman on it. He built it for Mordecai, but let's just put Haman on it. What did they do? They hanged Haman on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's anger subsided. Haman is now dead. So even though Haman's dead, a decree has been made. What decree? That all the Jews are going to die. And this whole next section, it kind of records what Esther and Mordecai did to ensure the preservation of the Jews who lived throughout the whole vast Persian Empire, because they've been exiled. Remember, they all lived in Israel, but now they came in and conquered Israel, and they've been exiled all over the Persian Empire. It says, that same day, King Ahasuerus awarded King Esther the estate of Haman. That beautiful estate that he lived on now was Esther's. Well, wait, she's not living in the palace with the king? Well, yes, she was, but also now she has an estate. It says, he awarded Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. Mordecai entered the king's presence because Esther had revealed her relationship to Mordecai. So now Esther comes and tells King Ahasuerus, Mordecai's my uncle. He raised me. He's Jewish, obviously. She's now revealed that she's Jewish. Obviously, these are my people. Haman was going to have us killed. It says, Mordecai entered the king's presence because Esther had revealed her relationship to Mordecai. The king removed his signet ring he had recovered from Haman and gave it to Mordecai. And Esther put him in charge of Haman's estate. So now Mordecai gets to live at Haman's estate. Isn't that just awesome? The guy that Haman wanted to kill, to annihilate with all of his people, now he's living at Haman's estate. So now Zeresh and all his people got booted out of the estate. And here's the thing is, like, these two were like so connected. And even though their husband and wife, they had made the decree to kill the Jews. But think about this. If God can change the heart of King Ahasuerus, he can change any heart. He can change any heart. Then Esther addressed the king again. She fell at his feet, wept, and begged him to revoke the evil of Haman, the Agagite, and his plot he had devised against the Jews. The king extended the gold scepter toward Esther. Once again, Esther had favor. Anytime that he puts the scepter on her, that is showing favor to her. It says, the king extended the gold scepter toward Esther, so she got up and stood before the king. What is it that you would like? She said, if it pleases the king, I have found favor with him. If the matter seems right to the king and I am pleasing in his eyes, let a royal edict be written. Let it revoke the documents the scheming Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, wrote to destroy the Jews who are all in the king's provinces. For how could I bear to see the disaster that would come on my people? How could I bear to see the destruction of my relatives? King Ahasuerus said to Esther, the queen, and to Mordecai, the Jew, look, I have given Haman's estate to Esther, and he was hanged on the gallows because he attacked the Jews. Now that you have my signet ring, Mordecai, now that I've taken it from Haman and I've given it to you, write in the king's name whatever pleases you concerning the Jews. Like it totally changed. And seal it with the royal signet ring. A document written in the king's name and sealed with the royal signet ring cannot be revoked. So here it is. Esther's commitment to her people, which really it jeopardized her safety. The king could have easily rejected her request and even killed her. She put her own life on the line for her people. It was very selfless. And this accounts for the high honor the Jews have given her since all these events have transpired. If you go now and speak to Jewish people, Esther is very well esteemed because she protected the Jews. It says, on the 23rd day of the third month, that is the month of Sivan, the royal scribes were summoned. Everything was written exactly as Mordecai commanded. He got to write the king's decree. For the Jews, to the satraps, to the governors, and the officials of the 127 provinces from India to Cush. The edict was written for each province in its own script, for each ethnic group in its own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language. In other words, this decree went all over the territory. It was massive. Different languages, different people were included in this. Mordecai wrote in King Ahasuerus' name and sealed the edicts with the royal signet ring. He sent the documents by mounted couriers who rode fast horses bred in the royal stables. So get this, the first decree that Haman and King Ahasuerus wrote was to destroy the Jews. We know specifically that it had gone out on April 17th, 474 BC. And remember, if it's BC, you're counting down, all right? That was in chapter 3, verse 12. So now the Jews had over 8 months because Haman had rolled the die, and it said that on March the 7th, 473 BC, that all the Jews would be killed. They had 8 months to prepare. But now, Mordecai has written a new decree, sent it out quickly, and this all happened June 25th, 474 BC, about 2 months after the first decree. So you think if your people are going to be annihilated in 8 months, that you start preparing to defend yourself. How do we defend ourselves? For 2 months, they have been defending themselves. Verse 11 says, the king's edict gave the Jews in each and every city the right to assemble and defend themselves, to destroy, to kill, and annihilate every ethnic and provincial army hostile to them, including women and children, and to take their possessions as spoils of war. Now, wait a second, including women and children. How do you read that? I think you can obviously make it seem like they can go kill the women and children of the enemies. But I think the children and women, in light of this passage of text, it's in view of those of the Jews, not the enemies of the Jews. Like if they come to kill the women and children, then they can defend themselves. So you have to think about how that's interpreted in this, because this is all we have. Verse 12, it says, this would take place on a single day throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus on the 13th day of the 20th month of Adar. A copy of the text issued as law throughout every province was distributed to all the people so the Jews could be ready to avenge themselves against their enemies of that day. The couriers rode out, and it says this again, couriers rode out in haste in their royal horses as the king's urgent command. The law was also issued in the fortress of Susa. This was like the main capital area of where they were, and there were a lot of Jews in this area. Mordecai went from the king's presence clothed in royal blue and white with a great gold crown and a purple robe of fine linen. The city of Susa shouted and rejoiced, and the Jews celebrated with gladness, joy, and honor. In every province and every city where the king's command and edict reached, gladness and joy took place among the Jews. There was a celebration and a holiday, and many of the ethnic groups of the land professed themselves to be Jews because fear of the Jews had overcome them. When it says holiday, we think about that actually means literally a good day. That's what holiday means. You think this may have been the Feast of Purim that they still celebrate to this day, but it really wasn't. That didn't happen until March. It's usually the first or second week. It's based upon a Jewish calendar, but it was the actual Purim when they rolled the dice and they were supposed to be killed. This is when they celebrate the Feast of Purim even to this day. So that would have been on March 13th and 14th this year in 2025 that they celebrated that feast. Get to chapter 9. We're almost done. The king's command and the law went into effect on the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. On that day when the Jews' enemies had hoped to overpower them, just the opposite happened. The Jews overpowered those who hated them. In each of the King Ahasuerus provinces, the Jews assembled in their cities to attack those who intended to harm them. They didn't hurt anybody except for those that came at them. Anybody that was anti-Semitic and showed that they came to harm the Jews defended themselves. Not a single person could withstand them. Fear of them fell on every nationality. All the officials of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and the royal civil administrators aided the Jews because they feared Mordecai. Like they were so prepared to defend themselves that they annihilated everybody that was against them. Now everybody's afraid of him. For Mordecai exercised great power in the palace, and his fame spread throughout the provinces as he became more and more powerful. The Jews put all their enemies to the sword, killing and destroying them. They did what they pleased to those who hated them. Mordecai is like so powerful now that in this whole Persian government that even the lesser officials sided with the Jews out of fear of Mordecai. Like, we're with the Jews. We're with the Jews. We're with them. In the fortress of Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men, including, and I'm not going to read all those names. There's 10 names there that are hard to read, but they killed these 10 sons of Haman. Those 10 names were Haman's boys. Like, your dad was against us, we know that you're against us, and you're done. It says, however, they did not seize any plunder. Remember what Haman had decreed was that he was going to kill all the Jews, he was going to plunder them, take all their riches, everything that they owned, and he was going to distribute it to the king. And the king said, no, I don't want that. You keep it for yourself because I don't want it to seem like I'm the one doing this. Haman, this is on you. So he was going to take all the Jew stuff. The Jews like, We're not taking their stuff. We're just defending ourselves. On that day, the number of people killed in the fortress of Susa was reported to the king. The king said to Queen Esther, "In the fortress of Susa, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men, including Haman's 10 sons. What have they done in the rest of the royal provinces? Whatever you ask will be given to you. Whatever you will seek will also be done." The fact that these people were even willing to attack when the Jews knew that they would protect themselves is proof how strong anti-Semitism is. Like, they knew that there was a decree that, hey, they can defend themselves. You're putting your own life at risk by attacking the Jews. They still did it, and they lost their lives, every one of them. Esther answered, "If it pleases the king," he's gone back after that day and asked her if she needs anything else. "If it pleases the king, may the Jews who are in Susa also have tomorrow to carry out today's law. Make it 2 days. And may the bodies of Haman's 10 sons be hung on the gallows. Let it be known, you can't do this to the Jews." The king gave the orders for this to be done, so a law was announced in Susa, and they hung the bodies of Haman's 10 sons. The Jews in Susa assembled again on the 14th day of the month of Adar and killed 300 men in Susa, but they did not seize any plunder. The whole purpose of the bodies of Haman's 10 executed sons on the gallows was really to disgrace Haman, the guy that was going to destroy the Jews. And then it also put a little bit of fear in people that the Jews were able to strike back. Verse 16, it says, "The rest of the Jews and the royal provinces assembled, defended themselves, and gained relief from their enemies." Watch this. They killed 75,000 of those who hated them. So not only 500 in Susa one day and 300 the next day, but throughout the whole Persian Empire, the Jews killed 75,000 anti-Semitic people. But they did not seize any plunder. They fought on the 13th day of the month of Adar and rested on the 14th, and it became a day of feasting and rejoicing. But the Jews in Susa had assembled on the 13th and 14th days of the month. They rested on the 15th day of the month, and it became a day of feasting and rejoicing. This explains why the rural Jews who live in villages observe the 14th day of the month of Adar as a time of rejoicing and feasting. It is a holiday when they send gifts to one another. So literally now at the Feast of Purim, they send gifts almost like we do at Christmas. Mordecai recorded these events, sent letters to all the Jews in all of King Ahasuerus' provinces, both near and far. He ordered them to celebrate the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar every year, because during those days the Jews gained relief from their enemies. That was the month when their sorrow was turned into rejoicing and their mourning into a holiday. There were to be days of feasting, rejoicing, and of sending gifts to one another and to the poor. So the Jews agreed to continue the practice they had begun as Mordecai had written them to do. For Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them. He cast the pure, that is, the lot, to crush and destroy them. But when the matter was brought before the king, he commanded by letter that the evil plan Haman had devised against the Jews return on his own head, and that he should be hanged with his sons in the gallows. For this reason, these days are called Purim, from the word pure, because all the instructions in this letter, as well as what they had witnessed and what had happened to them, the Jews bound themselves, their descendants, and all who joined them to a commitment that they would not fail to celebrate these 2 days each and every year according to the written instructions, according to the time appointed. These days are remembered and celebrated by every generation, family, province, and city, so that these days of Purim will not lose their significance in Jewish life, and their memory will not fade from the descendants. Purim is the only Jewish holiday that is mentioned in the Bible that's not mentioned in the Torah. The Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible, which we believe that Moses wrote. So Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. That's the Torah. But this is outside of that. And then there's an absence of the mention of God in the whole book of Esther. It doesn't even say God in here. And they're Jews. They believe in God, but even though they don't mention God, they don't talk about God, Esther is more obedient to Mordecai than she is to God. you just think they just totally left him out. But here's the thing is, God didn't deny his help to him. He still helped him. Instead, this whole thing reflects the attitudes of the Jews who chose to ignore God's commands through Moses when he gave them the 10 Commandments, through Isaiah, through Jeremiah. And they wanted to return back to the promised land. They pushed God aside in their lives, just the same way that Mordecai and Esther apparently have done to the same extent. Yet God remained faithful to his people every time. The last few verses. Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, along with Mordecai the Jew, wrote this second letter with full authority to confirm the letter about Purim. He sent letters with assurances of peace and security to all the Jews who were in the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus. In order to confirm these days of Purim at the proper time, just as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had established them, and just as they had committed themselves and their descendants to the practices of fasting and lamentation. So Esther's command confirmed these customs of Purim, which were written into the record. It's history. They're still practicing this today. This all happened. This all occurred. This whole mess right here actually is a part of history. But Mordecai and Esther, Jews that saved the Jews. In the last 3 verses it says, chapter 10, King Ahasuerus imposed a tax throughout the land, even to the farthest shores. All of his powerful and magnificent accomplishments and the detailed account of Mordecai's great rank with which the king had honored him have not been written in the book of the historical events of the kings of Media and Persia. Mordecai the Jew was second only to King Ahasuerus. He was famous among the Jews and highly esteemed by many of his relatives. He continued to pursue prosperity for his people and to speak for the well-being of all of his descendants. That is the story of Esther. And here's the thing. God delights in lifting up the nobodies to make them somebody. The whole book of Esther, it shows how God remains faithful to the promises no matter in spite of all of his adversaries, his antagonism, and his people's unfaithfulness. He will remain faithful. He will remain faithful. I get the question not all the time, but frequently. Can a person lose their salvation? Like a person that comes to know Jesus, the Son of God, as their Savior and Lord, that he died for them on the cross. His blood was poured out for the forgiveness of the sins. And if you believe that, then you have salvation. It's just simply belief. That's all it is. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to come to church. You don't even have to be a good person. You just have to believe that that's true, that Jesus is the Son of God and he forgave your sins. The fact that maybe even as a child you may come to know that, but as you grow into an adult and you become unfaithful to that, see it quite frequently. They become unfaithful to that. My God is still faithful. My God is still faithful. No matter what your response is, no matter what your behavior is, no matter what your act is, no matter if you change your mind, no matter, my God is faithful. That's who he is. And I sit here and I'm not a Jew. I can't relate to it like they can, this story, but I can attest to God's faithfulness for sure. I can attest to it. That this is who he is. And he is a loving God, and he loves his people. And he loves you. Father, I thank you for the story of Esther. I thank you for this day that we can gather here. And I know there's a lot of people that are out this weekend. May they be able to hear your message and may they understand your faithfulness. And Lord, I also on this weekend of Memorial Day, I thank you for all the men and women that have defended us, that have died for us, so that we can sit here on a Sunday morning and teach the Word of God in total freedom, that you continue to provide for us. So we thank you for those men and women that have fought for us. And so, Lord, today, as we just leave this place, may we be reminded of how much you dearly love us, how faithful you are to us. And I pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.